It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
Become death. I am the destroyer of worlds. Donald Trump ain't Jesus Christ, but he might be Vishnu. And 8 small children aged between 1 and 14 have just been mass murdered in the American state of Louisiana. But many more are due to be murdered by the great task force which Donald Trump is even now assembling in the Middle East. And the peace talks in Islamabad are cancelled for now because actually the other side are not going to attend them. So whether or not J.D. Vance is already on the plane, he might enjoy a vindaloo, but he won't be looking into the eyes of his Iranian interlocutors. The war goes on. And not just that war, lounging insouciantly on his aircraft, Donald Trump told us war against Cuba is next. It is the mother of all talk shows. If I were you, I'd stay tuned. And it's live, coming to you from totally tropical climes. It is the mother of all talk shows, with the best guests and the best calls, and some say the best monologue, but I don't want to sound too much like Donald J. Trump, who is increasingly sounding like an unhinged madman. He made 47 posts on social media in 60 minutes. In the course of the middle of the night last night, which ranged in a bewildering mosaic of a rendition of Frank Sinatra singing My Way, the song of every narcissist in the world. It's a good song. Paul Anka wrote it, and Frank renders it wonderfully. But it is nonetheless the song chosen by every narcissist at their funeral. And the political funeral of Donald J. Trump is surely not to be long delayed. A bit like the British Prime Minister, yes, the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for whom it's not just a case of living on borrowed time, his time is up. Multiple crises are mounting and beginning to strangle the premiership of Keir Starmer, the block of wood, who unexpectedly won a landslide parliamentary majority without any discernible traits of leadership or competence at any time in his miserable suburban life. Keir Starmer is now under a triple siege, if not a quadruple. Here's the triple, first of all. He is caught red-handed of having deceived Parliament, deceived the King, deceived the people on the security vetting of Peter Mandelson, the bosom buddy of Jeffrey Epstein and Tony Blair, that he dispatched crazily as Britain's ambassador to Washington, only to have to sack him unceremoniously like he'd been sacked from government twice before. No one will ever know what possessed Keir Starmer to make such an appointment, not since Caligula appointed his horse a proconsul of Rome has there been a more grotesque misappointment. No one will ever know, perhaps, exactly why. Was it cash? Was it compromat? Was it something else? We don't yet know. Maybe we never shall. But what we now do know is that in repeatedly stating that Peter Mandelson had been positively vetted by the British security services, who are not James Bond, but they're not quite Mr. Bean, not yet at least, he was lying through his teeth all along. It is a resignation offence, without any ifs or buts, to lie to Parliament. And we're going to find out on Monday, tomorrow, and on Tuesday, when the head of the civil service in the Foreign Office, peremptorily dismissed by Keir Starmer 2 days ago, whether or not the civil servant blows the whistle on Keir Starmer. My guess is that he will. I'm told by my sources that he's increasingly angry about the way he's been made a scapegoat for a decision which can only have originated from, and the buck can only have stopped, at Keir Starmer himself. Some people say he didn't even know he was the Prime Minister. Certainly, he regularly says he didn't know when things go wrong. Never crossed my desk, he says. Many people are wondering if he even has a desk. So many things have never crossed it. But the one thing for sure, it is impossible to believe that his man in Washington failed the MI6, MI5 test and nobody told him. That is stretching credibility way beyond breaking point. So it may very well be that prior to his statement in the House of Commons tomorrow, in which he's going to be badly mauled if the members of Parliament act as they should, he may actually tender his resignation in the morning, in which case Britain will no longer have a Prime Minister and the Labour Party will be looking to find a new one. Good luck with that, lads. I warned you. I told you over and over again. You made a very, very bad decision. The second crisis, the second siege, the second ring of siege is the imminence of local government elections and national government elections in Scotland and Wales, where the main parties now are the nationalist parties who seek to break away from the United Kingdom. It would really be something if Keir Starmer's lasting legacy to the United Kingdom was to be the reason why the United Kingdom ceased to exist. Everywhere I go, abroad, which is all the time now, people are not yet seized of the existential threat to the United Kingdom's very existence. If Scotland becomes an independent country, the country is cut in half, geographically, almost literally, psychologically, way more than half. If Wales decides on independence, then England becomes, well, little England. And as far as most other people in the state are concerned, it'll be the better for that. The local government elections in England are going to be a catastrophe for Keir Starmer. I'm going to predict to you now that in excess of 1,000 Labour councillors will lose their seats, and a good number of them will be losing their seats to yours truly, to my party, the Workers' Party of Britain, and north of the border, the Workers' Party Scotland. We are going to win seats in Greater Manchester in numbers, in Birmingham in numbers, in Halifax, in Bury, in Oldham. We are going to have a great night. But Keir Starmer is going to be, if he hasn't fallen on his sword tomorrow or Tuesday, then he's going to be crying into his stale, pale, warm ale, which is his drink of choice. The third ring is the most potentially deadly of them all. Now, because I'm abroad and because I don't listen to D notices anyway, no one has served one on me, and even if they did, I'd hold it up now and show it to you. But no part of the British media, none, zero broadcaster or newspaper, is covering the fact that at the end of this month, 3 Ukrainian rent boys are on trial for allegedly arsoning the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Yes, arsoning. Rent boys, massage artists, male models, every one of them a Ukrainian, is charged with arsoning Keir Starmer's front door, his back door, his vehicle, his former vehicle, his former back door, and his former front door. 2 separate residences, 2 separate vehicles were inexplicably arsoned, allegedly, by these 3 Ukrainian rent boys. Now, if this were happening to me or any other citizen in the land, every person in Britain would be fully conversant and would be speculating wildly on exactly why these Ukrainian rent boys allegedly arsoned the British Prime Minister. But not one news report, not one analysis, not one deep dive has occurred into the extraordinary circumstances of a serving British Prime Minister being singled out for reasons we know not why, allegedly, by 3 Ukrainian rent boys. And very pretty boys they were, too. The men are pleading not guilty. They may very well be innocent of this heinous crime of arsoning. But they may very well have to be cross-examined. They may very well have to be examined. They may have to undergo all kinds of tests. But by the end of the trial, we'll know one whole lot more about just what they had held against the British Prime Minister. These 3 rings of siege are definitely going to see the end of Keir Starmer. But back to the madman. At least Keir Starmer doesn't have the means of bringing about the destruction of the worlds. But Donald Trump does. And seems, especially in the midnight hours, in the wee hours of the morning, when it's just him and his phone, Melania having sensibly repaired to an entirely separate wing, not bed, not bedroom, an entirely separate wing of the White House. It's just dumb and getting dumber by the hour. With his telephone that no one in the White House, not even, perhaps, especially not Melania, are in a position to tell him to put down his phone. I don't know about you or other married men watching, but when my wife knows that I've been doing too much on the phone, she tells me to put it down, and if I don't, she takes it out of my cold, dead hand. But nobody seems able or willing to do that with Donald Trump. And he's going to cause World War III as a result of it. Now, part of it is confected insanity. Of that, I'm now in no doubt because I'm watching the stock market. I'm watching the trades that are being made on a Friday and being cashed in on a Monday. I'm watching the insider. I think I know who he is. He's a big, tall fellow. Very, very, very tall. So tall he can't serve in the military. Who is betting every Friday that the oil price is going to considerably fall because Donald Trump, the President of the United States, is going to talk in highly optimistic terms about the course of the Iran war. He's going to tell us the agreement has been reached. Let's take Friday, for example. He told us that the straits were opening. Now, leave aside the fact the straits were open before he began the war. Leave that freakish truth behind for a moment. He put out a meme saying this was a great day for humanity, that the Straits of Hormuz was now open. But it wasn't. It was a lie. He made it up. But he made it up for a reason. Because no sooner had that statement been made that the oil price began to plummet as low as $80 a barrel from a high, not the paper high, the reality, the real price of oil of some $160 to $200 a barrel. A drop to 80 is a big, big gap. And the stocks of weapons-related companies, thinking that the war might be coming to an end and the inordinate demand for military-industrial complex stocks began to fall, their price began to fall. He later claimed on Friday that Iran had agreed to hand over its dust, its nuclear dust, its highly enriched uranium, in other words, scientific words, Don. But that was a lie too. Iran had never agreed to any such thing and would not, will not ever agree to any such thing. So by the close of trading on Friday, the straits were no longer open. It was no longer a great day for humanity, and the nuclear dust was remaining where it is now, deep under the ground in the Islamic Republic of Iran. So the war was back on again. What happens on Monday? Well, ordinarily, the price of oil and the price of armament stocks would rocket up again, and somebody who bought them at a low price would be selling them at a high price. But there are two complicating factors now. The first is that Japan has just made its biggest ever dump of American Treasury bills. Japan needs the cash. Japan, like rest of the world, has no confidence in Donald Trump's economy. And so, having surreptitiously, like a salami, been dumping American bills and American debt that it owns under duress, they were forced by the Americans to buy it when they had money, when they were doing well, have now begun to dump big time. You could hear the splash all the way in the Straits of Hormuz. And the second thing is that China has completed doing the same thing. China now holds only half of the dollars that it did hold only 5 years ago. It holds less than half of the American debt and treasury bonds and bills that it did 5 years ago. China is buying gold with the money that it recoups from the sale of these American assets. And China and Russia are the world's biggest buyers of gold. They know, just like the Japanese government knows, that very, very bad news is coming for the American economy. But going back to the 47 posts in 1 hour. That's almost one per minute. So frenzied was his spree on social media that he thrice double posted the same post. 3 different posts, double posted. So he was in such a paroxysm of something, whether it's the burgers, whether it's the Diet Coke, whether somebody's pumping the room full of drugs, who can tell? But for a man who apparently doesn't drink alcohol, Donald Trump is on one hell of a crazed bender. If you didn't know that he didn't drink alcohol, you'd definitely take his car keys away. But he has something far more deadly than car keys at the foot of his very bed. He has the nuclear trigger. This man can and might set the entire world ablaze, starting with Iran, but not finishing there. This week, he's doubled down on Greenland. He's having it, taking it, not buying it, not asking for it. He's having it from his own ally, faithful, docile, dog-like, obedient Denmark. Couldn't happen to nicer people from my point of view. But what's really in his sights? With the approbation of the Wall Street Journal, who said this week that for all Donald Trump's problems and failures, he might be about to achieve something that has eluded all American presidents since 1959. He might liberate Cuba. So it could be like Louisiana, where 8 small children have just been massacred in a domestic dispute with their parents and their neighbors, so that Cuba can go back to being a grisly bordello run by gold-toothed generalissimos for the edification of American gangsters and their trophy wives. You know who I'm talking about. Donald Courter, good friend of mine, great journalist, great broadcaster, has just been in Cuba. And we'll be talking about that and more with him right now after this short break. It's the mother of all talk shows. I think you don't have to worry about these things with Mamdani, because my overwhelming feeling is that Mamdani is a phony. He has as much intention of doing these things as, you know, I compare him to a figure in British Labour history who became briefly famous in the US when Joe Biden was found to have plagiarized him during a presidential run some decades ago. But that man's name was Neil Kinnock. He used to talk all this flowery, far-left guff like Mamdani does, but he had no intention whatsoever of actually doing anything about it, of doing any of it. So there's no chance whatsoever that Mamdani is going to defund the New York Police Department.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, has Iran won the Trump war? Yes or no? 45,000 people have already voted on this poll, and I'm only announcing it now. Has Iran won the Trump war? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel. You should be following me there anyway. That's t.me/George Galloway. On my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or if you're one of the creme de la creme, the vanguard, the avant-garde, and you're following me on patreon.com/ George Galloway. You can also vote there. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the United States and Canada. 01 844 944 3344. That's +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland. 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Donald Courter is an award-winning journalist and broadcaster and host of the excellent Revolution Report, and he's just back from Cuba. Donald, welcome. I did see the reports that you made in Cuba. Very powerful they were, as always. Your stuff always is. And I've been in Cuba in many, many dark times in the so-called special period after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The land was dark. And according to the normal laws of aerodynamics, the bumblebee can't fly, but it does fly. According to the normal laws of economics and politics, Cuba should have fallen then, but it did not. Is it going to now?
Well, George, first of all, thanks again for having me on the program. I don't think it's going to fall, but there's of course no sugarcoating the situation now. I, of course, was not in Cuba when the special period took place, but I've spoken to a lot of Cubans here in Moscow, and also when I was there on the island. A lot of them are comparing the current situation to the special period there because of course, the halt in Venezuelan oil shipments to the socialist island nation, which, of course, Venezuela was the main foreign supplier of oil to the island. And so there are severe energy shortages. There are gas shortages, too. Unfortunately, garbage is being left on the street uncollected because garbage trucks don't have enough gas to collect it all. Basically, when I was there, throughout most of the country, there are just blackouts for about 22 hours out of the day, aside from Havana. But I spoke to a lot of people there, not just, of course, party officials or government bureaucrats or people like that, but ordinary people on the street. Actually, I'm going to upload some of these interviews on my channel on YouTube soon. Ordinary people who remember what it was like before the Cuban Revolution. Not one of those people that I spoke with said, yeah, I don't like the Cuban government. We need to go back to capitalism. No, these people told me that they're ready to fight any sort of U.S. invasion. They're ready to fight down to the last drop of blood, one guy told me, just like back in the Bay of Pigs when, of course, the United States sent a bunch of Cuban exiles that they trained in a very bad way. And it was a complete failure, obviously. I actually went to the Bay of Pigs when I was there. There was no electricity. Lucky I had your book with me, George, the Fidel Castro Handbook, because I used that to reference the Bay of Pigs, history of the Bay of Pigs invasion for the report that I did there to compare it to this current situation we have where Trump says that he's going to take the island or that he's liberating it through this embargo that's essentially it's starving people. There's not enough food on the island. There's not enough energy resources. But let's look at what happened last time. I mean, the Bay of Pigs was a complete failure, and the United States sent bombers. You know, they didn't just send troops. They sent these Cuban exiles with tanks, bombers. The Cubans on the island defended themselves with almost nothing. They strapped machine guns to training planes and shot down American military-grade bombers. Fidel Castro took direct command of the defense himself. He jumped on a Soviet tank that the Cubans had that they didn't even know how to drive. I mean, they figured out how to drive them during that invasion, right? If the United States couldn't take the island then, I think with the current Communist Party, the current military infrastructure that Cuba has, the United States is going to run into another Iran situation, I think. I think it's going to be a total quagmire for the U.S.
I haven't been to Cuba for some time, indeed, since the demise of Fidel himself. Do you sense any weakening at all of the position of the ruling party, the current leadership? Are they as firmly in command? I mean, it's one thing following Fidel on a Soviet tank. I'd do that. All my children would do that. My mother and father would have done that. Is it still the same in Cuba, is what I'm saying?
Well, I think in terms of what I observed, I think it's not as necessarily, the Communist Party doesn't have as much support, I would say, as it did during Fidel Castro. I spoke to some young people, right? I mean, there's plenty of young people on the island that completely blame the government for everything that's going wrong. They don't buy the line that it's because of the embargo. I mean, it's like that in many countries that face the U.S. imperialism, right? There's always going to be a younger liberal population that doesn't really understand the causes of why they're going through the sort of economic hardship that they're going through at the time, and they just blame the easiest people that they can blame, of course, the government. But I mean, even those people, when you talk about Fidel Castro, you know, they won't say that Fidel Castro was a bad guy. They'll say that Fidel Castro had his time, but we need like a change in government or whatnot. But of course, these people are really in the minority in terms of the people I spoke with. It's just more popular amongst young people. But you know, the fact that they told me that, I told them I'm a journalist, right? Just goes to show how Cuba is not some sort of dictatorship where everybody's scared to talk about things. People told me straight up, they don't like the government. You could say that in Cuba. And it's also, you know, it reminds me of how, right, of course, the United States and the Cuban government right now are in discussions about the future of Cuba. And Trump apparently wants Diaz-Canel to step down. Diaz-Canel told the American media, of course not, right? Why should the United States dictate to Cuba what its leadership is? Diaz-Canel is not a dictator. Cuba has a much more democratic system than in the United States. They don't allow money to be involved in the elections. They don't allow for political campaigning. People vote for a person in power based on their actual qualifications, which is much more democratic than the kind of circus show we have in the United States, which allows some guy like Donald Trump to come to power.
Indeed so. Let's talk about him. It would indeed be a feather in his cap, which is a clown's cap, but it would still be a feather in it if he were to bring about the demise of the Cuban Revolution. How would he do that? I mean, have you any idea what he has in mind when he says he's going to knock down the Cuban government?
Well, I think it would be something similar to what we saw in Venezuela, right? The sort of quick, surgical precision attack that just takes out the head of state and sort of tries to intimidate the rest of the state apparatus so that they play nice with the United States. I think that's Trump's strategy basically in all the places where he's trying to initiate regime change, because he doesn't want this quagmire sort of situation like the United States saw in Afghanistan, Iraq. He doesn't want a drawn-out war like that. So I think it would be something, he would try something similar in Cuba. But the thing is, I mean, the Cubans have two advantages now that the Venezuelans did not have when this happened. I think the Cubans understand that the United States wants to do something similar to what they tried to do with Nicolas Maduro. And now they saw also how Iran has dealt with the situation of the United States moving in on them, so-called preemptive strikes on the Iranian government, while they themselves were in the middle of diplomatic negotiations. But the Iranians, you know, they've actually given, they've been a huge thorn in the side of the United States during this operation. And I mean, negotiations are still going on. This whole situation is not entirely over. And it's very likely that the Iranians are going to be able to give the United States a real black eye when they thought that they would end this all quickly. So perhaps the Cubans are studying this situation and they're putting together their own plan of how this is going to happen. Of course, the Cubans don't have, you know, a long-term missile program like the Iranians do. They've been accumulating ballistic missiles for the longest time in preparation for such an operation. the biggest downside of the Cuban situation is the embargo, that they have very little access to, weapons from outside. I mean, they can't even get really medical supplies, which is a huge problem that the Cuban medical system is amazing, but without the proper medications or medical equipment, many people go without treatment. So I think if there was to be some sort of attack from the United States on Cuba, it would meet a guerrilla resistance, I think.
Of course, when they did what they did in Caracas, the only people that actually fought them were Cubans. And the Cuban security detail of President Maduro fought to the last man. They lost a couple of dozen, maybe 3 dozen of their people there. When Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada, the only people that took up arms against the American invaders were Cuban construction workers working on the airport, on the airfield. And I myself have seen the graves of the Cuban heroes who gave their lives in southern Africa to defeat apartheid. So the Cubans, historically at least, are no pushovers. They must be preparing for that people's war, are they?
I think absolutely. Even Diaz-Canel himself recently said in an interview, I think it was with MSNBC, that he's ready for war. The country's ready for war, and they're not afraid of a war with the United States. I mean, psychologically, they've been prepared for it for decades. I mean, the United States has always been an extremely hostile force right on the doorstep of Cuba. The embargo was instated practically at the beginning of the Socialist Islands' existence, right? So psychologically, at least, they've had a feeling that they're probably going to come to blows with the United States at some point. But as of recently, I think most definitely they've been preparing. I mean, the Cuban military is organized, right? I mean, the like you said, there in Venezuela, there were plenty of Cuban operatives there. The Cubans were the only ones who defended in Grenada when the United States attacked. And I think this sort of fighting spirit of the Cuban people continues. And it's because of the tradition of the revolution that people are really still inspired with that in the military age population. I mean, I also spoke when I was there to the director of one of the main biotechnology facilities in Cuba, which for anyone who doesn't know about this, I mean, the biotechnology sector in Cuba, of course, was a sector that Fidel Castro specifically wanted to invest the country's time and energy into as a way for the country to have a high-tech sovereign industry. And this industry still continues into the modern day. I did an interview with the director of its main facility in Havana, and he said, I mean, the people they still remember the revolution. They're still ready to fight tooth and nail to defend it, no matter whether the Soviet Union is around or not. But Cuba still considers itself an independent socialist nation. It sees how other countries that fall to U.S. imperialism end up. And no matter how poor the embargo makes the country, it's only going to be worse if the Cuban island becomes another neo-colonial object of the United States. And I think the vast majority of Cubans know that.
I talked earlier about Louisiana. This is true of the U.S. as a whole, but infant mortality is much lower in Cuba than it is in Louisiana. Life expectancy in Cuba is much higher than it is in Louisiana. The standards of literacy and the cultural level of the Cuban people is much higher than it is in Louisiana. I'm not beating up on Louisiana. It's just in the news tonight after a mass murder of children there. The lure of America has never been lower, has it? I mean, you'd need to be pretty stupid to look across the 90 miles to the United States and say, hey, I want to live like they do.
Listen, take it from an American that was born and raised in the United States and now lives in Russia. I mean, when it comes to education and healthcare and all these social services in Cuba that are still of very high quality that the Cubans enjoy, in the United States, we didn't have any of that. I mean, there's a lot of course, beautiful Hollywood propaganda about life in the United States that even Americans look at and they understand that doesn't really reflect their own lives. But I mean, this is in reality, if we look at what the actual social situations are between Cuba and the United States, we see the difference between two societies that are motivated by very different factors. The United States is a capitalist society that's motivated by one thing: profit. On Cuba, it's motivated by raising the living standards of the people, because the government is made up of a party that has a socialist system that's interested in raising the living standards of the people. Preventative medicine, not medicine to make money like in the United States. I mean, we've seen how that system has failed in the United States. It's the most expensive medical system in the world, and yet the quality of it is not even close to certain European countries. I mean, education, right? I mean, as an American, when I left America, I was shocked to see how well educated people were in other places in the world. Cubans are no exception. They're very educated people. And the crime of the embargo really is that it's made it so that in the Cuban economy, you have these people who have degrees in doctors, for example, or people who have degrees in aeronautical engineering and all these really difficult subjects. And because of the embargo, the only way they can make money is to drive a taxi in the tourist sector. Now imagine how much more developed and how much better the Cuban economy would be if it wasn't crippled by this embargo, right? It's incredible to see how an island nation like Cuba, which has basically nothing in comparison to the United States in terms of material wealth, how they can provide a better material reality for the poorest people of their population than that of the richest country in the world, the United States. And if you look, it's not just Cuba either. I've also been to the DPRK many times, and I've also looked at their stats. They have a higher life expectancy than Louisiana as well, along with Mississippi and another of other states in the United States. That's North Korea. I mean, if you told your average American that, they'd probably be very surprised. And the North Koreans themselves also are some of the most educated people that I've met in my life.
Donald Coulter, as always, a pleasure talking to you, and an education also. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. That's Donald Coulter, award-winning journalist and host of the Revolution Report. Let me take a quick break, and then I'll hear from Charles in England, in Portsmouth. Stay tuned. He's a schoolyard bully, Piers Morgan. And he does have a big show, but then he has a big and plush and very well appointed studio. And he has a big and very well paid staff. He has a very big budget. He's an extremely wealthy man. And the combination of all of that does give you a certain head start. We, on the other hand, are a mom and pop business. There's just me and Gayatri. And the people who told me the phones are melting are my own grandchildren who are answering the phones for nothing. This is an unpaid gig I'm doing, and do twice a week. Nobody pays me one brass farthing to make this show, to present this show. I'm not sure that Piers Morgan would tell you how much he makes.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Have you voted yet in the poll? Has Iran won the Trump war? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm not yet at 1 million subscribers, and my life will change if I can get to 1 million subscribers. Don't let me down on that. Subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you support the show through patreon.com/George Galloway, you can also vote on there. Charles, as I said, is in Portsmouth in England, and he has a point of view. Let's hear it. On you go, Charles.
Hello, George. Thanks for your time, and thanks for keeping me updated in the world. My question is, how long do people in Europe have if liquid natural gas and oil is continuously blocked because of the numerous failed ceasefire due to Israel never stopping with attacks with bombing Lebanon?
Well, Charles, I couldn't hear all that question. Indeed, my volume needs adjusting, but I got the gist of it. Are people in the so-called West, in the so-called free world, so free I have to leave the country in order freely to be able to speak to you? It is, I think, now a commonplace that our economies are in tatters, our societies are in tatters, in ruins, with social peace itself increasingly endangered. None of us would be surprised if we woke up, God forbid, to the news tomorrow morning that widespread rioting had taken hold in our country, with all the horrors that implies of looting and violence and the rest. We pray that it should not, but none of us would be surprised to learn of it. In Germany yesterday, there were hundreds of people besieging the German Chancellor Merz as anger rises throughout the Western world at the cost of living crisis. It's actually underselling it, calling it a cost of living crisis. We simply can't afford to live. We can't afford the energy costs. We can't afford the consequent or concomitant rising food costs. I was looking just before we came on air at the rise in staples over the last 4 years since we began this maniacal anti-Russian crusade that we have been on, and everything is at least 50% more expensive, and many things are much higher than that. We have destroyed our economies. We've destroyed our societies. Nobody is happy in Germany. Nobody is happy in Britain or in France. The reality is our societies are coming apart at the seams, and we're ruled by people whom everybody hates. I mean, if Keir Starmer does resign tomorrow as the British Prime Minister, you'll hear the cheering from Portsmouth all the way to Banff on the northern coast of Scotland. You will hear cheering everywhere in the land. This is the most hated man in Britain, and he's our Prime Minister. What hope have you got if you actually hate, not dislike or disagree with, if you actually hate the people that are governing you? What's democratic about that? What's free about that? The answer is precious little. Now, it may very well be that we all go up in that puff of smoke that Oppenheimer feared when he quoted Vishnu. I am become death. I am the destroyer of worlds. That's possible, especially when Donald Trump has got his finger on the trigger. Who would bet against that? Who would bet their whole life against Donald Trump creating nuclear war in the world? I wouldn't. I wouldn't bet against the European Union leaders. This little runt in charge of NATO, Mark Runt, I wouldn't bet against him sending us all up in nuclear smoke or incinerating us into nuclear dust. But here's the unpopular thing, Charles. I've probably got you so far. But here's the unpopular thing. We voted for these people. We did. Don't dodge that fact. You either voted for these people or you didn't try hard enough to avoid their being elected. Now you've got another chance. At the beginning of next month, on the first Thursday of the month, you've got the chance to send the most overwhelming message of rejection of the government. Are we going to take it? Or are we going to see local government election turnouts of 20, 30%? Well, if we do, then we deserve all we get. That's the truth of the matter. I've done everything I could. I've put up 82 candidates with all the costs and energy that requires and required. But there's thousands and thousands of councillors who are to be elected. So vote for us if you can. Vote for anybody other than Labour. It hurts me to say that. But whatever you do, don't vote Labour. And if you do, or if you don't go out to vote against them, well, frankly, what else can you expect other than what's coming? Many thanks, Charles, in Portsmouth. Now, you can leave comments on the YouTube. Scan the QR code now. Leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Like Hoopsoholic 1888, he's a Celtic man, who says, saying Iran has won right now is a bit like saying Celtic had won at half-time today. Didn't we put 6 past St Mirren? I don't know. Alicia Smalley, 871, says it's not Trump's war, it's Israel's war of aggression. And Hoops replied, another Celtic man, says, tired of the Americas being controlled by Israel line. There was no Israel in Vietnam, Cuba, or supporting military juntas in South America. And John Galt says, what are the Americans going to do? Blockade Iran's blockade of America's blockade of the Iranian blockade? And honorary Aryan al-Husseini says Dan Blitzerian and Greta Thunberg are 2 weeks away from developing enriched uranium, according to the Israeli government. Dan's the man. We got nearly 1 million hits of our interview with Dan, and he has got millions just referring to his interview with me. We're going to keep a close eye on that contest in Florida. It's fair to say we have a dog in the fight. Mehdi is in California, wants to talk about Israel and Lebanon. Go ahead, Mehdi.
Hey, George. Amazing to be on the phone with you again. You're an absolute legend, and your grandchildren are doing an amazing job on the phones. So God bless all of you guys.
Thank you.
A very quick question for you. Is it true that the Lebanese military is not allowed to have an air force? How true is that? And if it is, why aren't we talking more about that? Because if Lebanon were allowed to have a legit military, then there would be no need for the locals, the local residents taking arms to defend their homes and properties in the south.
Well, that's a complicated question, Mehdi, with which I've been familiar for more than 50 years. It is not the case that Lebanon is not allowed to have an air force. It doesn't have an appreciable air force, that's true, because Lebanon is a deeply fractured society in sectarian terms. The Shiite Muslim population is overwhelmingly the biggest population, and if it had a powerful army, an entirely sovereign army, then by definition the Shiite Muslim population would be the dominant force in the army. The Christian population, which would be the second biggest on paper at least, of the populations, would not fit easily into an army staffed by people, officered by people, and manned and womaned by people with whom they were so politically and in all other respects alienated. The divisions in Lebanon are such that a weak army suits the state. It suits the state because they then don't have to do anything when they are attacked, as they have been all of my adult life. In fact, all of my life since I was a teenager and first attracted to and interested in Lebanon. If they don't have an air force, they don't have to send it up to seek to intercept the Israeli air force. So it kind of suits the state not to have a powerful force. But when you are regularly invaded by Israel, as Israel has been doing at least since 1978, and I was first there in 77, dealing with the backwash of previous Israeli bombing and incursion raids. The reality is the people are going to arm themselves, and the bigger the population, the bigger the militia is going to be. And that militia has had to learn the arts of war. And by golly, they have learned them. And the Israeli forces currently being mauled, or at least until this so-called ceasefire, being mauled by the resistance in the south of Lebanon, already know that. Thank you, Mehdi. Now, a big shout out to some of tonight's top supporters who have been backing the show via the website, moats.tv. Jenny Fox, Martin Barnsdale, Mahmoud Ahmed, Teresa Steele, and Ramadan Youssef. A big thanks to each and every one of you, and every one of you who is going to go to moats.tv and press the Donate Now button. Let's go to Lance in Canada. We always get good sense out of him. Lance, welcome back. What do you want to say?
Well, I've never called sensible before. Thank you, George. I wanted to talk about disrespect. I watched this interview the other day. It was a British lady, something called LBC, and she was interviewing Dr. Morandi, and she was just so belittling and so disrespectful. And I've watched interviews with that Dr. Barghouti, and they're just so disrespectful. And I guess I don't understand what human component could be in you could be disrespectful to somebody who's A, being respectful to you, B, achieved academically, C, actually both of them have been under fire and proven their courage. And I guess I just don't understand how, especially how in Dr. Morandi's case, how we can actually literally belittle somebody who's under fire at the moment you're talking to him, and who is being polite to you, and who has very fat achieved.
Salary depends upon you doing so, Lance. These are prostitutes. They're not journalists. These are professional liars that staff the upper reaches of the broadcast media and the print media. This mass murderer who ran amok in Kiev the other day, for example, is described in the Daily Telegraph today, or the Sunday Telegraph today, as Moscow-born madman runs amok in Kiev, killing 8 or maybe more people. Moscow-born. Well, apart from the fact that the head of the Ukrainian army is also Moscow-born, this man is a Ukrainian army soldier who has served twice in the Ukrainian army, is 59 years old, and has just been called up again for the Ukrainian army for the third time. And he was running amok with a machine gun precisely because he had been shanghaied again to serve in the Ukrainian army in the war, the NATO war against Russia. But for the Sunday Telegraph, he's Moscow-born gunman. Only a prostitute would write that. Only a whore would write that, knowing that where the man was born is completely irrelevant to him becoming a mass murderer on the streets of Kiev. You know that. You know why he went berserk on the streets of Kiev, but you allowed yourself to write Moscow-born gunman because you're a whore. You're a prostitute. You are for hire, and you're prepared to sell your most intimate parts, your mind, your conscience, for money, for an employer who, by the way, will discard you without a moment's hesitation, as they have done so many thousands of you before. So not only are you a prostitute, you're a $20 hooker who, when things are better, will simply be left standing on the curb. Let me take a quick break because we've got Jackson Hinkle, the one and only, coming up pretty shortly, and I need to get my earpiece sorted out. Stay tuned.
The king of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, at this time said something incredible. You can't imagine it being said nowadays by any of these Arab leaders. He said, "You are the ones who can't live without oil. Our ancestors lived on dates, and we can easily go back and live that way."
Yeah, but you can't live without oil, just for completion. Now, there was a man, a real king, a real Arab, a real Muslim, King Faisal, who quadrupled the price of oil to the Westerners who needed it, in defense of the Palestinian people, in opposition to the settler apartheid state of Israel and its land grabs. How different. You know, I've never admitted this to you, but I was actually well old enough to remember that historical fact that you have just cited. And I was, in fact, quite prominent politically at that very moment. And I wrote about it in my audiobook, Street Fighting Man, in some detail. So I'm bitterly aware of how the Arab world in 1973 has declined as I look at the pitiful performance of the Arab leaders who can only convene to denounce Iran for retaliating to a massive American and Israeli attack upon themselves, but couldn't lift a finger even to deliver bread to the starving Palestinians in Gaza.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's hear from Mehdi. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is such an honor because one thing I want to tell you is in 2003, I thought that you, I'll say it, I thought you were a prattling liberal idiot. 20 years later, I'm here honored to speak to you to say live on air, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you back then. You're bringing the truth to what's going on out there. And one of the things is U.S. policy, whatever it is now, is our government. The problem is that it's run by people with absolutely no honor. They have no shame in what they will do to accomplish what they want. And I really think part of what's going on that's driving what's going on in Ukraine is that It's the possibility of all the corruption that it will uncover that has happened there with the influence of our country and NATO since 2014.
Yeah. You spoke extremely powerfully and very graciously, and I'm grateful for it. But you put your finger on, I think, something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. I grew up in a time, indeed I sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, during a time when there were certain standards. There were double standards, of course, and there was a great deal of hypocrisy. But the ruling elite had standards that they tried to keep up. Nowadays, that facade has been torn asunder. Now they're not even pretending to be honorable gentlemen and ladies. Now they're no longer pretending that their institutions, their great departments and ministries are in anything to do with contemporary politics other than an arm of the ruling party. My last word, Mehdi, I ain't no liberal, bruv. I wasn't back in 2003, and I ain't any more liberal today.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Has Iran won the Trump war? That's the poll this evening. It could reach 50,000, you know. Could be a 50,000 vote poll. Has Iran won the Trump war? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll, on the YouTube stream, or on patreon.com/George Galloway. Now, one of the brightest stars on the political firmament and on the broadcast firmament is the one and only Jackson Hinkle. I've known him since he was a boy, but he's a grown man now and producing some of the best television and some of the best political analysis to be found anywhere in the world. He is the host of the wonderful Legitimate Target. Jackson Hinkle. Jackson, welcome back to the show. We've got so many theatre to cover, but I just interviewed your friend and mine, Donald Courter, who's just back from Cuba, and I was struck by Trump on a kind of whack-a-mole. 1 minute he's threatening to end civilization in Iran, and then in the same breath he tells you that he's going to that Cuba's going to be next. It will be war on Cuba next. If it isn't war on Denmark, and it's already been war on Venezuela, and Mexico might be for it. We've never lived in such times where such brazen, vulgar, violent, threatening language came all day and every day and right through the night from an American president. What do you think's going on there?
Well, thank you for the kind words and for having me on. As always, I must remind you, I learn from the best, and you are chief among them. So happy to be here. As for the situation in Cuba, I mean, it's incredible, the hoops that Donald Trump is jumping through to try and justify what has been a wet dream of Marco Rubio and his ilk for so many decades, that being regime change and a total war on Cuba to Gazify Cuba. And, you know, it was just a few days ago that Lula da Silva pointed out that, well, Trump, you keep saying that you have to go in and commit to regime change in Cuba because the people are starving and there's no energy. Of course, we don't even need to get into the fact that this is a result of U.S. sanctions and the U.S. blockade, which has been imposed for decades. But if that was true, if that was all the impetus one needs to launch a war of aggression, an illegal war upon a sovereign people, then what is Trump doing about Haiti? Because Haiti is right next door, another island nation, and it too has collapsed long ago, also as a result of extensive U.S. pressure and warmongering and intervention. But you don't hear Trump talking about that. And it's because, as we all know, countries like Cuba, countries like Iran, they pose a serious threat to the U.S. imperialist order. These are countries that refuse to allow J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs to run amok in their markets, and they refuse to bring in Rothschild banks. So that's the real threat here. There's no serious threat to American civilization or to, farmers in Iowa or Ohio from the citizens or the government or the military of these countries in any way, shape, or form.
Jackson, look, I come from a shrunken part of the world. Britain, Europe are not what they were, and their democratic systems are very far from what they were always claimed to be. But I've got to tell you, if our Prime Minister tweeted 47 times in 60 minutes a stream of violent madness, men in white coats, or at least men in grey suits, would be escorting him out of Downing Street by the morning. And yet the American system seems to be incapable of rising to what is an obvious challenge, a cognitive challenge. This is not normal, and yet it is being normalized in the United States.
Well, it's not normal to bomb 160 plus schoolgirls in the first day of an illegal war. It's not normal to back a genocide in Gaza. It's not normal to launch a war on Yemen for a total of a month and a half and then get your butt kicked and go running now to the waters of South Africa because you're so fearful of Yemen's Ansar Allah. But this is the exact type of mindset in a leader that I guess is preferred by the powers that be in the financial capital class in the West to achieve these insane, not normal sorts of goals. And I'd have to say that Donald Trump is doing he's doing an okay job of achieving their goals. Maduro is gone in Venezuela, and the IMF is very happy about that. They're now embarking upon a new relationship with the government of Venezuela post-Maduro. You look at Gaza, well, they definitely achieved their demonic goals in Gaza. They're in the process of doing that, and the next step will be for Jared Kushner to try and builds the Epstein Island 2.0 in Gaza, and probably also 3.0 in Cuba if they can achieve their goal there. And as for Iran, well, that's been a real, I think, sore spot for the president and those in D.C., those in the Pentagon, those in the Department of Energy. And I think that's why you see this insanity coming from his Truth Social account, where he's posting out nonsense every 2 or 3 minutes, claiming that Iran had agreed to give up their highly enriched uranium. They didn't. Claiming Iran had agreed to open up the Strait of Hormuz without any tolls. They obviously didn't. And all the other lies that we've heard since the start of the war each and every day to justify what's been an abysmal failure, a suicide mission, really, for the United States.
Yeah, but is there a method in this madness? Because every time he tweets lies, we could call them nonsense. We know they are nonsense, but they are studied lies. He knows that Iran did not agree to hand over its enriched uranium to the US. He knows that the straits were not going to be reopened, but it did cause a massive fluctuation in energy markets and on the stock market. And people who track these kind of things are telling us of really unfathomably fabulous profits that are being made by insiders who know that Trump is about to say something positive and a portent of good news to come, and who know that the opposite is going to happen, and they make their dispensation on the oil, on the other stocks and shares accordingly. Two of his sons are openly working in the military-industrial complex field on drones and other things, and being given gigantic government war contracts. His friends are at the stock market game all the time. So, you know, Richard Nixon pioneered this trope. Tell them Nixon is crazy and he's capable of doing anything. Is that what Trump's up to, maybe?
I think maybe we're assigning too much responsibility to a man who's too far gone. I think that the real culprit lies, as you put it, in, yes, his sons, probably even more so in Jared Kushner, who by all accounts is running this administration right now. Surely he's running the negotiations with Russia, a country I think he knows next to nothing about. And also, he's, in effect, I think, leading these negotiations with the Iranians. I mean, there was word in the first round of negotiations in Islamabad that Trump had said J.D. Vance will not be in attendance. There's talk of another round of negotiations set for Tuesday, potentially, and J.D. Vance apparently won't be there either. But Jared Kushner and his best buddy's sidekick, Steve Witkoff, will be in attendance. And I think it's quite clear when you boil it down. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't even understand what's happening around him in the middle of the day as he's taking questions from the press. Someone in the press asked him the other day, yesterday, President Trump, what do you have to say about the Strait of Hormuz being shut down once more? This was hours after Iran had launched missiles or drones or speedboats, whatever they did, in the direction of those two Indian crude tankers that were trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump said, is it shut down? I don't know about that. We'll find out about it later today. I don't think he even understands what's happening. He's being fed information, likely from people such as Kushner and people like Kushner, who are very comfortable with the oil-producing nations in the Gulf. As I understand, he's either on the board of secret.
Now, Jackson, if you're still there, we've lost Jackson, unfortunately. Has Iran won the Trump war? Getting on for 50,000 people have voted, and most people think that Iran has won the Trump war. Donald won't like that. We've got Jackson back. Jackson, I was just going to say, I saw a picture of you in Moscow today, a very beautiful picture actually, of you at work in the gym. I've just left Moscow. What about the big enchilada? If it is any longer the biggest enchilada, maybe the Iran theater has become more dangerous. But what of the ongoing, never-ending war over the dead bodies of Ukrainians and Russians, launched by NATO as a matter of deliberate policy? I attended the premiere before I left of Steven Seagal's new film, Breaking Point, which deals with, in brilliant detail, how we got to the war in Ukraine. And a miserable story it is. Is it going to come to an end anytime soon? And if so, how?
I think that's the question on everyone's mind. I mean, it could have come to an end, hypothetically, the day that Trump first entered the Oval Office. As I was saying before my internet cut out, my apologies, it is quite simple to end these conflicts. Everyone makes it seem like Trump has so many problems that he has to solve, but the truth is, you and I both know, is he's creating all the problems. All he has to do is drop the sanctions on Russia, drop the sanctions on Iran, give these countries their frozen assets back to them, the assets that they illegally seized all across the world. And of course, you know, there has to be a new security framework for Europe in the case of Russia, and for the Gulf and, Arab countries in the case of Iran. we need to make sure that the U.S. is not allowed to build new NATO bases directly on Russia's border or directly on Iran's, next to their coastline in these Arab Gulf states. It would be quite simple to do. And sure, I'm willing to bet that the Russians and the Iranians would be more than willing to act in a pragmatic sense in these negotiations if anyone felt as though the U.S. could actually uphold a deal. But that's the problem here. The U.S. talks about, 99% of the problem with Iran is we just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. How many decades do we have to have passed by before we all come to the understanding that, they're not developing a nuclear weapon, at least as far as I know? Well, so if that's the problem here, obviously it's not, there's more to it, then why can't the U.S. just uphold a single deal? That's the real problem. That's why the Iranians say they don't want to go to Islamabad this week. They had a deal. And the Lebanon ceasefire was being rejected by the Israelis. They turned Bint Jebel in southern Lebanon and many other cities into parking lots throughout the however many days, 11, 12 days it's been of this ceasefire. And still the Iranians were willing to go to Islamabad. But the U.S. couldn't stop the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz on Iranian vessels. And for that, they now are going to have to pay the price of probably resuming the conflict.
It looks as if it might be imminent. Colonel McGregor, something of an authority on these matters, is pretty convinced that there's going to be a surprise attack. Russia has just warned Iran to prepare for a ground attack. We could be in for a very big shooting war involving American ground forces with potentially horrific of casualty figures in the run-up to a midterm election which may determine not just the presidency of Donald Trump, but his liberty. If he's impeached and removed from office, then he may very well be in prison by the end of the year or not far into next year. Again, I ask, is this madness or is there something that we're not seeing?
Well, there's a lot. It's a lot of palace intrigue, of course. If Trump gets impeached, we're going to have Palantir's lab-grown candidate, J.D. Vance, who will take the oath of the presidency, and he'll be sitting in the Oval Office. I can't imagine too much will change. I know J.D. Vance likes to put out a bunch of press statements through proxies, acting as though he is somehow more sensible when it comes to the issues of the Middle East or Russia or China. But I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Proof is in the pudding, right? And we saw the proof in the pudding with Joe Kent. Regardless of what anyone thinks about his letter, he did leave the administration over the crimes he was witnessing and his refusal to be a part of this charade any longer. And the same goes to be said for all of the generals and commanders that left the U.S. military and left high-ranking senior brass positions in the U.S. Army over the past several weeks at the end before the ceasefire took place. But I do agree. I think we're about to witness a major U.S. invasion. I think it's going to go horribly wrong. The Iranians are prepared for every single scenario. It just came out yesterday. The Iranian brigadier general came out and said that, look, all of the plans that we carried out during the first section of this war were actually planned out months in advance. So you've got to imagine whether the U.S. tries to sail the 31st MEU, the 11th MEU, tries to fly in their 82nd Airborne Division. They've got about 14,000 additional troops in the region now since the war began. If they try to sail them and fly them into Karg Island or Keshem Island or any of the ports in the southeast of the country, they are bound for a very rude awakening. They are not prepared for the era of drone warfare They are not prepared for the era of drone warfare, especially when you're looking at amphibious operations. And we've seen just how unprepared they are in Iraq. We've seen the very, very sparsely armed Iraqi militias like Kataib Hezbollah and Hashd al-Shabi launching FPV drones at U.S. troops in these massive bases, the largest foreign bases the U.S. has on the face of the earth. And within just about 30 days, they kicked them out of Iraq. The only place U.S. forces are still in Iraq are parts of the Kurdistan region. They're not even in Erbil anymore. They got routed by a group of militiamen with some FPV drones. I can't imagine what they're in for if they try to invade Iran.
No, God protect them because they're only ordinary boys and even some girls nowadays. They've been conscripted by unemployment in the United States, conscripted by poor prospects in the United States, with little or no understanding of the high politics surrounding all this, and no understanding of the amount of money that their rulers are making from all of this. But finally, Jackson, as you know the country so well, the dog that hasn't barked or the shoe that hasn't dropped in this round, at least, of the conflict is Yemen. Their control over the Red Sea is potentially as deadly to the world economy as Iran's control of the Straits of Hormuz is. Will that shoe drop? Will Yemen join the war?
Well, I think that we are probably days away from that occurring if they decide to go through with this. Axios reported a few moments ago while you were live at the start of this broadcast that Iran is expecting a potential surprise attack from the United States and Israel in the midst of these failing negotiations. So that's a real possibility. But I think the real dagger that Iran has at their disposal is not Yemen's blockade necessarily on the Bab el-Mandeb Strait into the Red Sea. Of course, that's a really, really big obstacle for the U.S. and their allies and shipping all across the world. But I think the biggest dagger, of course, would be Yemen's Ansar Allah and their capabilities of targeting the oil and gas assets in the Gulf countries, in particular Saudi Arabia. We saw back in 2019 when Yemen had nothing. They had practically no drones, no hypersonic missiles. They had no Fatah 1s. They had nothing. And even back then, they managed to strike Saudi oil facilities so hard that in a single strike, it caused global oil prices to surge by 5%. Now we see a Yemen that is strong, that is unified, that is capable of targeting the northernmost parts of Israel with relative ease, either with drones or these missiles. I can only imagine how much those monarchies in the Gulf region are about to suffer if they decide to back another round of fighting, because they will be dealing with a new Yemen, a Yemen that is committed, a Yemen that is willing to put death before dishonor, and has no regard for the safety or well-being of the stock prices of these oil and gas conglomerates in the Gulf region.
Jackson Hinkle, our tour de force, as always. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows, political analyst and host of Legitimate Targets, the great Jackson Hinkle. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls right up to Gayatri. Stay tuned. I've got to tell you, most British people couldn't point out Ukraine or Syria on the map. This is a symptom of the Western decline. So I wouldn't, in other words, beat up the American public uniquely for that. This is a common characteristic. 4 million people watched Moats. That's a truly astounding number of people. I mean, astounding. But it's still a tiny number compared to the population even of the United Kingdom, never mind the United States, never mind both of them together, and the rest of the English-speaking world, and never mind the rest of the non-English-speaking world. So we have to keep in perspective. We have more people who know more than we have ever had before. But we have a huge number of people who, I'm sorry to say, are mere sheep, who give life's blood if necessary, who give their sustenance financially, and who bray when asked, and dutifully get on board the truck taking them to the abattoir. But it seems to me, given the unique horror of 9/11, the impact of 9/11 on the American psyche, that the very organization that the US government says carried out the 9/11 mass murder of thousands of American citizens is the same Al-Qaeda that American weapons, money, diplomatic cover, and endless propaganda was used to put into power in Damascus. Now, as a contradiction, that is as sharp as it's possible to get as a contradiction. And we must do more to proselytize for that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Has Iran won the Trump war? It is almost 50,000 votes cast, and it is overwhelmingly the view of the audience that Iran has won the Trump war, though, as someone pointed out earlier, you haven't won because you're leading at halftime. Let me go to California, where Amr wants to talk about Donald Trump. Who wouldn't? Amr, welcome.
Thank you so much, George. Wonderful to be on again. So Donald Trump is a little bit crazy, and he claims to have never drank alcohol, similarly to how the IDF never committed genocide, even though all the symptoms of genocide and one being drunk exist. But I think he suffers from multiple personality disorder, and the first of those would be the hero peacemaker, the protector of the Israeli state. Second, the eraser of civilizations, who also may be drunk at times. And third personality being redacted, yet to be seen. That's all I got to say, George.
Well, you say it's all you've got to say, but in a way it says everything. I've known people with an alcoholic personality who don't drink alcohol. And he seems to me a classic case of that. As a matter of fact, if you watch the film The Apprentice, which is rather a good underestimated movie of the early years of Donald Trump, he did in fact drink at least once. He got blind drunk with the man that became his mentor and maybe even his lover, Roy Cohn, the criminal lawyer, and I emphasize criminal lawyer in New York City, who became the man that taught Donald Trump all the dark arts, and nobody knew the dark arts like Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn gets him drunk one night on whiskey, forces him by shaming him, what kind of man are you that doesn't drink alcohol, and so on. And Donald spends the night in the sumptuous presence of Roy Cohn. I urge you to watch that movie if you haven't already seen it. It's called The Apprentice. Now, the truth is, Donald Trump is both in rapid cognitive decline, perhaps in dementia, at the same time as retaining some of the low cunning of the criminal real estate developer in New York City that was under the wing of Roy Cohn. And that combination is far more toxic than any alcoholic cocktail. Now, you can download, by the way, the Moats podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. You can listen to the weekly podcast also on the moats.tv website. Once you've listened, please make sure you leave a review and rate it. Helps us to grow the podcast. Today we are among the top 10 podcasts for politics in Greece, Kuwait, Egypt and Zimbabwe this week, as well as ranking in the top 30 for politics in Turkey, UAE, South Africa, Ireland and Pakistan. That is a splendid collection of countries. Let's go to San Francisco, as a song once invited us, where David wants to talk about the economic impact of the war. Go ahead, David.
Oh, thanks, George. And as you're just going through the demographic of listeners, we've had, am I the third caller from California? So, yeah, you've got a demographic out here, too. Hey, well, I'm just thinking in a business sense of what Donald Trump is doing to the oil industry. When the oil prices jump $30 up, $40 down, up and down, day by day, you never know what's going on. There are the oil jobbers, the people that fill up those ships, millions of dollars worth of transactions in a course of a minute. And if those guys end up buying high and then 15 minutes later they're kicking themselves for not waiting that extra 15 minutes to save $40 million, I'm wondering if what's going on over there is trying to crush the oil jobbers and create a monopoly of the oil industry. It's there are many examples of organized crime doing strong arm tactics, almost like the insurance game in history. Some of those old black and white movies described how organized crime would crush businesses. And so the idea that they're now doing it in a worldwide scale to create monopolies of the oil industry.
Well, I'll tell you what, David, I'm going to have to confess to you that I didn't hear a word of your question. I'm having rare audio difficulties tonight. This is a new studio that I'm in. It may be just gremlins that haven't worked themselves out yet. All I can say on the economics of the war is that I now understand how it is that Donald Trump managed to bankrupt a casino. It is an iron law of a casino that the house always wins. And yet Donald Trump bankrupted not one, but two New Jersey, Atlantic City casinos. A man that can bankrupt two casinos is a man who has a very peculiar idea of economy. Now, Moat's big donors tonight, I want to point out the people who are helping keep this program independent and on track week after week. So a big thanks to John Ryrie, Greta Pansini, Kerry Pay, Mashdid Amir Shahi, and Svetslav Pavlovich for standing behind Moats. Heroes, everyone. Please join them and go to moats.tv and click the Donate Now button. Let's hear Robert in Jamaica on the upcoming elections. Robert, welcome back. What would you like to say?
First of all, George, thank you for having me again, and congrats on your program, which has been in the forefront of educating the world in exposing these atrocities that has been going on. These atrocities include the genocide in Palestine, Lebanon, and the extension of the war in Syria and Iran. The crazy behavior of Netanyahu and the IDF, and the sheepish yet destructive behavior of the U.S. to follow Israel into the war against Iran like a little lapdog. It is unbelievable. The good thing, though, is that the eyes of the world has opened, and the real terrorists and the network of that terrorism, which is based on the marriage of the great Israel plan, the military-industrial complex, and the Wall Street cabal has now been fully exposed. Over 90% of the world now know what's going on. This has presented an opportunity for a change, and the only change can come peacefully is in the electoral system in the West, and especially in the U.S., where the biggest control is had. There is a trend in the U.S. now to support any candidate who are not backed by the numerous Israeli lobbies headed by AIPAC. This is where the education has to begin. This is where voters have to open
Robert, I'm still having these audio problems, and when I break in a minute, I'm hoping to get a new earpiece that might work. But I've got to make this point, that Israel is a dirty word in the United States now. I mean, it's hard to understand that given the stranglehold that they have over the political process. But all of the polling from everybody, Democrat and Republican and Independent, all the polling from all of the pollsters shows that a majority of Americans now are opposed to Israel. And a majority of Jews under the age of 35 in the United States are now opposed to Israel. So the days of the Israel lobby are numbered. Sure, the people who are in power now are in power because of the Israel lobby. But in contest after contest, you will see that AIPAC, formerly the king of the hill, has to hide its presence in the battlefield nowadays. And in contest after contest from here on in, it will be an electoral disadvantage to be the Israel candidate in American politics. That's what we've worked for. It's what we've got to continue to work for. Plenty of people, millions of them, had to sacrifice their lives to get to this point, but we have gotten to this point. Let me take a quick break. Then it's Reza in California who thinks that Trump is an asset. An asset to whom? We'll find out. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Situation in the Gulf is perfectly simple. A Faustian pact has been reached by utterly unrepresentative family dictatorships and the United States of America, which has gradually, and to a greater extent in some of them than in others, forced them to come to terms with Israel and to abandon what they previously saw as their Arab and Islamic dignity in maintaining at least rhetorical attachment to the Palestinian people and their cause. And so now there are two masters. There's the American master and the Israeli master. And whilst almost always they are in tandem, they are not entirely always in tandem. So, for example, Saudi Arabia would not join the Abraham Accords. It would not normalize its relationship with Israel, even though, of course, covertly, under the table, they had relations. They would never publicly renounce the Palestinian cause in the way that these other Arab slave governments have done. And they wouldn't join the accord, they wouldn't afford recognition, they wouldn't normalize their relationship. And the price that they've paid is a protection racket price. It's literally a protection packet. Although, as I always say, at least when you pay the Genovese family in New York for protection, after a fashion, they will give you protection. If somebody trashes your business or some freelance thief wants to rob from you, the mob, the mafia, will impose themselves on you, on them, and will ask you for a higher premium in future. But Trump hasn't even done that. He literally abandoned the people that have been paying him and his country a king's ransom and more for decades.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I'm closing the poll at exactly 50,000 votes cast, and overwhelmingly everybody believes that Iran has won the Trump war. Let's go, as I said, to Reza in California, who thinks Trump is an asset. What do you mean, an Israeli asset, a Russian asset, Chinese, Wall Street? Whose asset is he, Reza?
Salam alaikum, Sir Honorable George Galloway. You are the man.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
You are the man, the myth, the legend, the one we should all aspire to be, the one who fights for truth, justice, the poor, and humanity. You have truly proven that you are the only son of Jor-Al because of your balls of steel. And so you last, I think a couple of your shows ago, you said that Trump was an asset. And I completely agree, and I believe he is an asset of Israel. He has done nothing but to take the country of the United States down, made Palestine a more dangerous place, and has completely ruined the world and made himself a really rich man and all of his family members. I don't understand why people haven't woken up, littered the streets, and have just not taken this guy down. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't feel sorry for any American that fights for their health care, fights for their food stamps, fights for any of that stuff, when you're being robbed blind. You're not doing anything about the man that's taking your money, but here you are, sitting in a coffee shop, drinking your expensive coffee, and you're not doing anything about taking this guy down, or any of these representatives that are paid by IPAC. I mean, the United States has just become a complete joke. And, you know, my father was a diplomat for this country. My father was a spy for this country. I'm not proud of it. But, you know, he got out of that when he found all the disgusting stuff that was going on. But then they threw him in prison. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about this country. I paid my taxes, but I'm trying to fight.
Well, I don't know what to say, but I'm intrigued to know about your father being a spy for the country. Maybe we'll talk on another forum about that. It's an interesting and intriguing tidbit, but I don't understand it either, Reza. I tried to get an answer from Jackson Hinkle. My audio problems were such he may have answered it and I just didn't hear it. But it seems to me a systemic failure now. The American system, which has coped with a lot, it's coped with Roosevelt dying, it's coped with Nixon resigning, it's coped with the semi-dementia of Ronald Reagan in his dotage. It's coped with idiots like Gerald Ford, who famously couldn't chew gum and walk in a straight line at the same time. It's coped with fornication of Bill Clinton. It's coped with God knows what under Barack Obama. It's coped with the imbecile George W. Bush, but it has not coped with the style and substance of Donald J. Trump, particularly in this second term. It has completely failed. And we now have a man whose stream of consciousness is shaping not just the economic health or otherwise of the world, but the course of wars and the beginning and ending of wars. A stream of consciousness which is scarcely literate in consciousness terms. And yet nobody is able to do anything about it. Nobody's able to say to him, stop tweeting, stop deciding big matters and making everything more difficult. Whatever your point of view, if you support the war in Iran or you don't support it, it isn't helpful to have the thing conducted in the middle of the night by a guy who seems high, judging by the content and style of his social media output. I mean, if my social media output was like Donald Trump's, my family would have stopped me tweeting long ago. So it is the case that it is a systemic failure. No official, no fellow member of the government, no wife, no children are capable of restraining this man. This man is a Tyrannosaurus Rex in a children's kindergarten, and he's already killed plenty of children. And God knows what he did with children before he even became the president. That's another matter. But a Tyrannosaurus Rex in a children's kindergarten can do a lot of damage, which can never be undone. And Donald Trump is that beast right now. Thanks, Reza. I would like to hear about your dad being a spy. Irene says Cuban healthcare is why the USA puts sanctions on them. They are an example of good government. Amen to that, Irene. Gilbert Emhoff says Cuba and its civilized neighbors need to stop association or doing business with the mass murderers of children. And 444 Keep It SS says why Cuba has allowed the US to operate a torture prison on their land is baffling. And Antonio Cristoforo says Trump thinks he needs a win. He can't put down boots in Iran, so Cuba is supposedly a closer, easier option. Brian Ferg, UWPG, says I'd start smoking again if I could get a good Cuban cigar. Well, I smoked Monte Cristo No. 2 for many decades, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I stopped it for health reasons, but I still miss it. And if somebody told me I had 4 weeks to live, I'd go up on a hill with a few boxes of Monte Cristo No. 2 and smoke myself to death instead. But I urge you not to start. Smoking is a filthy, dirty, dangerous habit, as my editor is telling me to say. Last call before Gayatri. It's the legend, Erobos in New York. Oh my goodness. Iran's Women's Parade and Cuba, two vital issues of the day. Go ahead, Erobos.
Fidelitas facilitations and salubrious salutations to George the Giant Galloway, first of his name, the resident patriarch of Clan Galloway, and great shout out to the staff, of course. Jai the Magnificent, first of her name, well planted in life. Looking forward to, of course, Gayatri the Gracious Galloway, first of her name. I wanted to say very briefly about Cuba. They, based on the input from Donald Coulter, the people of Iran, many of the young people in particular, felt the same way until the bombs started dropping. Yeah. And then their loved ones, their friends, and, the places they care about started exploding under the bombs. Then they became nationalists. Then they became behind the leader. It is unfortunate, but you'd be dealing with two different class of people in the world, which segues into the Iran Women's Parade, rally, protest, and demonstration. I was watching Press TV, and I would urge anyone who wanted to see rolling live coverage straight from the country itself, Press TV, which featured me about 10 times in interviews, thanks to my appearances on the erstwhile HEWOG, Have It Out with Galloway, which tagline was, come and have a go if you think you're hot enough. So there's Sakina Datu. She, I think she's the executive director of erstwhile HEWOG. She invited me onto Press TV. However, what I watched two segments about the children's school that was bombed, and then they interviewed some girls, had them in a sort of stand-up demonstration in the classroom, and the women's rally. And I was moved, right? I mean, the last time I was moved by that, and that's not an easy thing to touch my heart, but with all the jaded stuff that's going on. It remind me of from Bristol to Baghdad, the bus documentary you did and the bus broke down. I could only watch that documentary once because it always brings me to tears. And I was brought again watching the women's rally, and there's this particular crew or troop inside the women's rally that wear white shrouds that said, "You are dealing with me." And all of them, even the little ones, are ready to give their life for Iran. There's this sign up for people who are willing to pledge to fight for Iran. It's almost 30 million people that are willing to die for their country. And what I meant about two types of people is that you have people who will betray their people, like what happened in Venezuela, and you have people who are willing to die to preserve their way of life and their sovereignty. And and I saw this with the Art of Killing documentary, and the Look of Silence as a companion about the Indonesia. This guy named what's his name? Anwar, I think it's Anwar Congo.
Indeed,
yeah.
he was. Yeah, Oppenheimer made the movie, very, very great movie, The Art of Killing, and should never be forgotten. I'm glad you brought it up. Sorry to interrupt you, Robos.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I know time is always against us, but you have people who sell, they have never been to prison, Anwar Congo and his crew, and of course Gayatri the Gracious, this is her wheelhouse. But, it demonstrates, watching that, what I got from it was you have people who celebrate, men of power, no matter how much evil, destruction, and carnage they did. On the plantation, we used to call it identifying with the establishment. And so these are the two types of people we have in the world, and you can even see it with Lebanon, which was set up under the French mandate to fail. That system structure will never work out until Hezbollah takes over the country. So I know I've said a lot, and I'm thankful for the time. Shout out to the sponsors of Moats that make it possible for us, and love, peace, and hair grease.
Well, a very beautiful call and a very succinct one, as always. Thanks, Robos. You covered a lot of ground, but I wanted to say how much and how strongly I agree with you. When someone attacks me on social media, I spend more time than I should probably, trying to work out why. Why did they attack me? Sometimes it's immediate and obvious, but sometimes it isn't. And sometimes it's downright disconcerting. No visible or apparent reason for the attack can be found, either from their biography or from their feed, their tweets, their retweets of other people, and so on. And sometimes it leaves me scratching my head. But you gave the reason. There are two types of people. There are the house and the field. There are the people who, I think you used the word celebrate. They're oppressors. Even though they themselves, as we put it in Glasgow, their arse is hanging out their trousers. They don't have two halfpennies to rub together. The system has given them nothing. And therefore only the most extreme form of false consciousness can be motivating their identification with their own exploiters, their own oppressors, the people who are exploiting and oppressing others. There's no other rational explanation. I know why somebody on the BBC who works for the BBC hates me. I know why someone who identifies as a big supporter of Israel hates me. I know why someone who loves Zelensky in Ukraine hates me. I get all that. I know why someone who wants to reinstate the Pahlavi dynasty in Iran, I know why they hate me. It's easy to work out. I know why a rich man hates me as the leader of the Workers' Party, seeking a better deal for the workers. These are all rational disagreements. These are all rational reasons for enmity between us. But there is a substantial number of people. Sometimes I call them sheep, sometimes I call them sheeple, but you put it better. They are victims of a false consciousness that has persuaded them to identify with people who, first of all, don't give the remotest damn about them, would pass them by in flames without pissing on them to put out the flames, who've never given them anything, will never give them anything, will never even remember their name. And yet, they identify with the criminal classes that rule your country and mine. Pleasure, as always, talking with you, Erobos, but the gracious Gayatri, the woman without whom the news wouldn't be the news, has joined me in the studio. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Well, let's start in Africa, because Burkina Faso seems to be doing a very good job. Well, we know that, of course, but how we really know is that in the past 1-2 weeks, the establishment media has been going crazy, attacking the country for it closing down over 100 civil society organization and NGOs. Well, we all know what NGOs are because no one but Fidel Castro put it better. NGOs are Trojan horses. So, but the establishment media described this as a flagrant attack on basic rights.
They really care about the poor people in Burkina Faso, of course.
They do. And this is on the back of the Human Rights Watch report titled "None Can Run Away." And then Sky News, they were invited to an exclusive roundtable press conference with Captain Ibrahim Traoré, together with the Italian RAI channel. They were the first from the Western media to have such an opportunity. And the question you just posed was exactly put by the Sky News presenter. Well, how do you deal with your freedom of democracy? Is there freedom to love who one wants? These are the kind of questions that come. They describe...
It's the old LGBTQ plus question.
It is. But the whole report is described as as Burkina Faso being a secretive country under a military junta where the people can express themselves, but not really. They said that the whole press conference was a completely engineered event by the communication department in a climate of repression and fear and intensifying
I'm glad I missed
terror
all
attacks.
that.
I know, yes, but this is now what's going around the established media because they are doing a very good job.
Yeah.
They are doing a good job because ever since Captain Ibrahim Traoré took over with his military government in 2022, he, of course, has expelled foreign troops, the French. They have invested so much in the country's infrastructure, roads, highways, housing, free housing, factories, and, of course, taking over their resources. A very clear example is the gold mines. When France owned it and foreign companies bought the gold that Burkina Faso digged from their own soil, they would get $1 billion annually. Now that Captain Ibrahim Traoré has taken over, they have generated $18 billion out of it, just by expelling the foreign parts in here. So that's the reality on the ground, and that's what, of course, the establishment media and base cannot handle. Well, the Pope, His Holiness the Pope, is currently in Africa for his tour. He visited Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and is on his way to Equatorial Guinea. And when he was in Angola, he said the following: how much suffering, how many deaths, how many social and environmental disasters are brought about by this logic of extractivism?
Wow. Well, look, that's all news to me. Before I tell you the news I've got for you, let me just say that for a short period of time in the 1980s, I worked in this sector, so I'm deeply familiar and I was present in the room when Fidel coined the phrase Trojan horses in Havana. Myself and my good friend John Bevan, we were there in Cuba when Fidel described NGOs as Trojan horses. I'm well able to testify that that is indeed what they are, and the Trojan horses contain within the enemy that seeks to stop the development of independent government in Africa. Government that is strong enough, sovereign enough to kick out the foreign exploiters, in this case the French, in many cases the British. And it's their job, literally their job, to limit the amount of sovereign decision making that will exist in developing countries. And now we've got a charismatic, powerful leader like Captain Traore, who is supported by Russia militarily, economically, infrastructurally, supported by China economically through China's vast outreach into Africa. Neither Russia nor China ever enslaved an African, ever murdered an African leader, unlike the Western countries whose NGO Trojan horses have been sent into the country. It's a subject worthy of a longer segment, if I may say so, maybe on Moats, maybe separately. Maybe you and I can have a conversation separately on that. But the good news I've got for you is the parliamentary election results in Bulgaria. You and I were in Bulgaria recently. We knew that the posture of the puppet government in Bulgaria, a puppet of von der Leyen and the other European Union Eurocrats, was not representative of the public that we met in Sofia, the capital. And we spoke to lots and lots of people. We found people wearing Putin T-shirts.
We did.
We discovered that the Bulgarian people did not hate Russia, even though their government showed every signs of hating Russia.
Best.
Well, the leader, former Prime Minister, is on course for a landslide victory in the Bulgarian parliamentary elections, which means that the new Bulgarian government will oppose aid to Zelensky and his regime in Ukraine.
Excellent.
So Orban got knocked out, but now Bulgaria has taken their place. And strong relations with Russia was the election platform of the victorious party in the Bulgarian parliamentary elections. Look out for acts of sabotage, but a big up to the people of Bulgaria, the people of Georgy Dimitrov, and the people of, well, I was going to name some footballers, but I don't want to intrude on private grief. Let's just say I'm quite happy that the title seems destined for Manchester, even if not my half of Manchester. Sorry, James, the poll was an enormous success, and overwhelmingly, you believe, even though it's only half time, that Iran has defeated Trump in the war. It's been marvelous for us. Hope it was for you. I had audio difficulties. I sincerely hope that you did not, and that you heard everything in the usual crystal clarity. And if you enjoyed it, please come back on Wednesday for the midweek mother of all talk shows. Until then, I'll bid you a good morning, as it is for me.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.